awesome to be here with you tonight. My name is Lynette Gibson McElhaney. I am a candidate for the sacred office of the District 3 seat on the Oakland City Council. And I come to this work not as somebody who's a political insider or anybody who really has political ambition. I work professionally as a community development executive, which simply means that I've dedicated my life to creating beautiful spaces in urban declined communities. So raising money, building housing, dealing with issues of crime, violence, and poverty, and I've done that for most of my life. I currently serve as the executive of NHS East Bay. We're a multi-million-dollar corporation that is exercising some leadership in the area of ceasefire, where we're dedicated on reducing homicides, gun-related homicides in the city of Richmond, and I will champion the use of ceasefire here in West Oakland. I am really seeking this office simply because our city is in dire need of leaders. Someone who can come into this work with the skills, experience, and maturity that it takes to forge coalitions, to stay the course, and to get over the politicking that has kept us behind for so long. So I look forward to engaging with you tonight to talk about the issues of economic development, how we're going to grow our economy to create jobs and increase revenues, how we're going to actually get down to the brass tacks of making our communities safer, and how we're going to partner with our schools so that we have a pipeline to college and career and not one that leads to jail and delinquency. So thank you for your time tonight. Infrastructure are simple. The improvements that we've seen around the lake came from a measure that we passed, Measure DD. Not only did it allow us to do lighting, landscape, tree removals, tree plantings, it also provided for jobs and job training. It's an economic stimulus that even in recessionary times, we were able to get some things done. Our voters have resoundingly rejected many bond measures, largely because we haven't had a confidence in the people who manage the money. The number one job of a council person is to manage the money. So the first thing we are committing to doing in this election, right, is to elect a body of people who will be responsible with our money so that we can get another infrastructure bond. But this is not just about the bonds that we passed. It's also the fact that Oakland is reeling from a foreclosure crisis that disproportionately impacted our city. We've lost revenues and continue to lose revenues month after month while those homes remain vacant. So as a housing professional, one of the things that I'll bring to the council is to prioritize getting those back in the hands of owner occupants, where we can incentivize the transfer to owners by giving tax rebates, or we can increase tax revenues on investors who are purchasing who may just be holding them for flip, because that's not necessarily going to be the best way for us to get our economy going. So in addition to the infrastructure bond, dealing with foreclosure so that we prioritize home ownership, we're talking about growing our economy. My three-pronged seat that you all see on my thing is about growing this economy to create jobs and increase revenues without adding additional tax burdens to our businesses or our families. So we will champion high tech and green tech and have businesses located here, increasing business tax revenues. We will do that. We will begin to bring in grocery and retail so that we don't have a billion-dollar leakage outside of our city and we're having that money come back and redeploy for us. And we will prioritize taking care of our infrastructure and those needs that have gone unmet for too long by just making sure that we have a budget that is focused in on outcomes. Graffiti, we're concerned about our dumping, we're concerned about people trashing Oakland. But we're also strapped for cash, as you said in your first question. So how do you pay for the removal of these things? And yes, you can criminalize a lot of stuff, but we already have a police department that is understaffed and overtaxed with more serious crimes that we're all concerned about. So deploying the police to go after children or even adults doesn't necessarily get at the systemic cause for all these things. And my folks come from the South, and I got a lot of Southernisms. You'll get to hear them over the night. And one of them is going to be that an idle mind is the devil's play shop. I talk about the number one thing that drives my campaign is the call for 10K2, the creation of 10,000 jobs, so that people don't have enough time to sit around bored, depressed, spray painting, and that we have people who can actually go to work, remove graffiti, and doing those things. We have 2 people in our city that are responsible for removing the dump. Every time you see Quick Fix, we got 2 trucks right now. We've had to lay people off. But if we can grow this economy to increase revenues without adding additional tax burden to our businesses and our families, we'll be able to restore our essential services. We'll be able to have people come and deal with this. And yes, we'll be able to invest in our lighting and all of those other things, but I don't think that criminalizing every bad behavior is the way that we're going to make our city safer or more productive. We have to be really, really practical. And then we can do some other things in the interim as well. We can leverage money for grants, and I champion inside that 10K2 call the creation of Civic Corps so that we can give people returning home from prison the opportunity to go to work. We can fund that both in terms of foundations and private grants like they're doing in Oxnard. We can also do it in terms of the city making a modest investment and then charging a fee for that. But I'll tell you what we don't need to do. We don't need to continue to penalize the victims of graffiti by having them pay fees and fines because they are the victims of people spraying on them. So we'll need to correct that as well. So, thank you. This question had to do with how do we stimulate growth in our economy? How do we bring reinvestment here? In 6 months of campaigning and talking with business leaders from our most prosperous corporations down to our small business owners, the number one thing that's been a deterrent to capital investment in this town has been an insane city council that can't agree on anything and is subject to change its mind after it voted for whatever it voted for last week. So the first thing, I mean, this is a really serious, it's a game-changing election because the winds of change are upon us. We have 1, 3, and 5 open. With no incumbent running, we have the ability to change the direction of this city by electing a seasoned, smart, competent council that can be the ambassadors for our city to bring capital investments here. So this is my work. And how we stimulate reinvestment is by starting with community level plans that bubble up. Can I tell you, Oakland is the most overplanned city ever. Take it off the shelf, dust it off, give it a new cover. We've studied it. In 2007, the Chamber commissioned a McKinsey report that said, this is how we're going to grow. Here are Oakland's assets. We have meds, our medical centers from Highland, Altabate, Summit, Kaiser. We have technology. We've got new emerging technology like Pandora. We've got Sungevity. We have the ability to move on our education system. UC's Office of the President is here. Peralta Community Colleges is banked here. We can grow in each of these sectors and begin to do it. So short term, how do we begin to do things? You have enough rooftops here. If we can remove the regulatory barriers, you can get a cafe, a coffee shop. I intend to champion the smart redevelopment of this beautiful dynamic train station so we can do something culturally relevant around our own heritage, similar to what they did with the train station in DC at Union Station, with restaurants, with shops, with music, that brings us back to our 7th Street glorious days. We can then go from our short-term plans into something more interim, which includes making sure that we're getting our housing units back up, and in the long term, that we're capitalizing on all of our assets, including the port, but not only limited to the port. All of the bandwidth of these sectors that we've already identified as things. 2007, the report was done. The Oakland Army base is a reflection of what they said would be smart back in 2007, but it just takes us too long to get there. So I just wanted to say that having this balanced approach is what has made me attractive. I'm endorsed as the #1 candidate from Sierra Club and the Oakland Builders Alliance, as well as having a dual endorsement from the Chamber of Commerce. Smart decisions will get us forward incrementally and then explosively. Thank you. I feel like I owe you a tip because everything that Derek is talking about, we tend to agree on lots of stuff, but when you look at the platform that I've set out before you, we talk about growing the economy, making safety, investing in public safety to make us more safe, and investing in schools so that we have a pipeline to career and college and not to prison. This issue of a spike in our crime it is tied, directly correlated to the loss in our economy. So we're coming out of the recession and we have opportunities. But the tyranny in our community is based on gun-related homicides. That is primarily what drives Oakland's negative public image, and it is the thing that has us all afraid at night, right? I met one woman at Kenna's party. She did a backyard party and told me she walks in the middle of the street. She risks being hit going to and from her house coming from the BART station because she'd rather take her chances with the car than somebody who can come out from the side. So there are things that we can do defensively. There's defensive landscaping. We can engage the police in that. There are things that we can do that, as Alex has said, we take responsibility, we create community watches. But we got to tell the truth about having a police department that is accessible, transparent, well-trained, responsive, and adequately staffed. And we don't have that. For too long, we've had a department that has been quite rogue. That has also made national news. The East Bay Express this last week had an article in there talking about how both Detroit and Oakland went under consent decrees in 2003 at precisely the same time. They're on their way out. We are being talked about going under federal receivership. Leadership matters. It is not just a question of what I do individually from my living room and if I call 911, if my department is neither responsive. Oh, well, real talk, I had a girlfriend who was being robbed. She called and they said, well, stay in the bedroom and we'll get to you. We know people who were robbed and the people showed up. OPD didn't show up for 2.5 days and then showed up at 3 o'clock in the morning to take a report. This is unacceptable. And we can and we ought to do better. Leadership matters and your vote matters on November 6th. I am Lynette Gibson McElhaney, and it is a privilege to stand in this seat right now to present my credentials and my skills for your consideration. The question that's been raised right now is one that is right, that is just right for our communities. You have African Americans who are concerned about being displaced. You've got affluent people who said, I moved to Oakland for its diversity. I don't want to be a part of a wave of gentrifying that leaves me less diverse than when I got here. How are we going to balance the tensions of old and new? And what I would say is that this is a generation of Oaklanders far better equipped than the last generation to deal with the tough issues of social integration. When African American Southern migrants like my family came from the South here for jobs, they didn't come to experience white flight. They didn't come to find themselves segregated in predominantly African American communities devoid of services and resources. And so there was a generation of people too afraid to stand put and live into the American dream. But that's not our generation. You all coming back into this community, mixed and black and white and Asian and Hispanic, are part of the promise of Oakland, the promise of America. And we have to do this work. And you need good leaders who know how to balance that. As I said earlier, how do you incentivize and make better the owner occupancy piece, using your tax code to incentivize owner occupants over investors? There are things that we can do within our social code that keeps us more diverse. You have to know how to balance the new, under the Palmer decision, you can't do these impact fees and inclusionary things. So how do you cultivate a relationship with developers so that they're sensitive to it and they want to? How do we make sure that when we are out here talking about the change that we so radically need and want, that we're not doing that at the expense of the families that are here? So that is why the platform that I put before you talks about driving our economy. So one of the ways that people get to stay is that they have an income that affords them to stay. It's talking about how do we make our cities safe, because the #1 reason why we lose our families isn't for anything other than feeling safe. It's good when you're a young hipster living uptown, but when you have 2 babies, you start thinking someplace else. So we're going to make our city safe. We can do it. All of Oakland's problems are man-made problems. They have man-made solutions. Let's elect a council that will take that seriously so that we live in the city and we have leadership that reflects the beauty and the diversity of our neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.